Welcome back to Six Sad Lit. I'm your host, Jen Eastwood, and today we're joined by a true icon of contemporary horror, Mariana Enriquez. Her short story collections, A Sunny Place for Shady People, Things We Lost in the Fire, and the International Booker Prize shortlisted The Dangers of Smoking in Bed are dark, dazzling, and deeply human. Her journalism fearlessly interrogates Argentina's shadows, and her novel Our Share of Night, winner of the Premio Heralde Prize, is an epic that blends the literary with the horrific, history with the occult, and the political with the painfully personal. In this episode, we talk about writing horror that swelters instead of chills, why music is essential to her process, and how Buenos Aires became one of her most enduring characters, and how folklore, poverty, violence, and memory all shape the way she tells stories. I couldn't believe it that Mariana would be able to join me in person at my actual house for this interview. It was such a huge honor to meet her, and she was so gracious with her time. So this is a very intimate, personal interview, and on occasion you might even hear my cute little doggy playing around in the background or shuffling some papers. So hope you enjoy this episode. It is our season finale for season 1 of Six Sad Lit. So please enjoy and let me know your thoughts over on Six Sad Lit on Instagram. Would you mind just introducing yourself and telling the listeners a little bit about your work?
Okay, I'm Mariana Enriquez. I'm a writer from Argentina, Buenos Aires. I'm also a journalist. I started publishing in the middle 90s, and I do mostly horror fiction, but I do a lot of non-fiction and biographies. I'm kind of all over the place, but what I love specifically is horror and dark fiction.
What initially drew you to horror as a form? I have heard you talk about Stephen King a bit. What led you to even read Stephen King for the first time?
I think before Stephen King, it was Gothic literature. I remember clearly, and ghost stories and stuff like that. I remember clearly when I was a kid, I had the whole bookshelves in my house that I could explore. My family didn't have any reservations or indications of what I was supposed to read or anything. And I picked a book, and it was always the ones I liked. I really liked. It was Wuthering Heights, Jane Eyre, mythologies that involved nasty things, the Odyssey with all the crazy parts, even Edgar Allan Poe. Even I didn't really understand him because he's not literature for a kid, because a kid is not perverted like he was. But it was that. Then many local writers also, Argentinian writers that dealt a lot with the fantastic, like Julio Cortázar and Henry James. I remember the impression when I read The Turn of the Screw. That was actually in a collection for kids.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I know.
Can't imagine that.
I know. And in the 70s, at least in Argentina, and I bet in South America, there was not a very developed young adult literature. Maybe children's literature, yes. But for children from, 10, 11, something like that, when you really start reading, if you read, there was not much. And the first Stephen King book, I think my uncle gave it to me for Christmas as a present because he knew that I like to read.
Which one was it?
Oh, the worst ones, Pet Sematary. And I was 12, I think, 13, very young. But I think he thought, first it was a bestseller, that in the cover said bestseller, whatever. So he thought it was safe. And then, of course, he had a cat in the cover. So he thought, I don't know, some story with cats? He didn't check.
Must be good for kids.
He didn't check. And I remember vividly reading it on Christmas Eve. No, the Christmas Day, the 25th, after the adults were all sleeping already because we were, up late and stuff. And I couldn't believe what I was reading. I was so scared. I didn't know literature could do that to you. Because everything was all the things that I read before were or very fantastic or Victorian London or England or This, of course, was America. That was not where I was living, but it's suburbia, a family. The father is a doctor. My mom was a doctor. It was very relatable. It was the first time I read horror that was contemporary. And I don't know, I was amazed and so scared. And I think the first time I thought, well, I would like to do this. But at the moment, it was more like, I want to read more of this.
I feel like Stephen King is so accessible as well as a horror writer compared to, say, The Turn of the Screw or Jekyll and Hyde, which are both excellent horrors, but he is so accessible with how he lures you into it and makes it really feel very visceral. I'll never forget my first Stephen King either, and it was one of his lesser known ones, Rose Madder. I'm not sure if that I read that when I was about 13 and that traumatized me. I was having nightmares about a masked, angry bull man chasing me in my dreams for so long, and I still I think about that book even now, like, quite a lot, and how terrifying it was.
He's really a master of storytelling, and the most popular kind of storytelling. The details in Pet Sematary, something that is very unfortunately usual. There is people having a fight in a wake, in a funeral. And there's the body of the kid there, Gage, and they having the fight, the father of the kid and the grandfather, because the grandfather is accusing him of not taking care of the child and stuff. And there's a point where they almost fall on the casket. And what Stephen King describes is how it's about to fall. It doesn't, but it opens a little, and you can see the little body bouncing inside. And that detail was like, oh my God. And there's nothing supernatural about it. There's nothing creepy in the sense of, fantastic or anything like that. It's just a dead kid and the family grieving. And how he makes that impossible to read, almost. I don't know. It's pretty much genius.
Yeah, it really is. So we were talking about music earlier, and you said that music is a really big part of your writing process. Is there any artist or band that you're listening to a lot at the moment, or do you have artists that you return to when you're working on a project?
I listen to a lot of things, so I'm very open in music, so the things I like are not necessarily the things that inspire a character or that are with me during the process, or sometimes they are not things that when you read it you think, oh, she was listening to this. The Dangers of Smoking in Bed, for example, has a quote of Will Oldham, because I was listening to Will Oldham. That's like creepy folk, and when you read the stories, maybe they are very in your face, what you would think is very punk rock or metal, but I was not at all musically doing that. Things We Lost in the Fire is the title of a record of a band called Low that thankfully didn't sue me or anything. They're from Midwest America, and it's also very slow, very sad.
Right.
And again, it's not something that you would think that I was listening. In Our Share of Night, there were all kinds of things, but there was also a lot of Argentinian folklore, because it's very related to the country in many ways. And there's a whole part that it's in 60s London that I used a lot of music to write it from that era, from late 60s and early 70s London English, basically, bands, because also it's occult, and those days they were very plain with the occult, many bands. So they reference a lot of things, and there's a lot of aesthetic about that. And David Bowie was name-checking magicians and black magic. Also, Led Zeppelin even more, like they were doing stuff. The Stones were doing stuff too, and they got scared. And Marianne Faithfull, the singer that at the time was also the partner of Mick Jagger, was in a movie by Kenneth Anger. It's an American independent filmmaker, like a pioneer of many things, but also a witch, serious witch. So that helped me a lot to put my mind in that era. And sometimes it's more like that. In novels, it's more like that. It's less a vibe that I get in my head than shaping the characters or the narrative. It's amazing how different it works, because for the stories I kind of listen to the same thing all over again, maybe 2 or 3 things all over again, but for the novel I really use music to shape the characters or the situations. It's different. I listen to music all the time, so it's kind of music most of the time brings me stories. The atmosphere of a song can bring a story.
I read a piece that you wrote for the Financial Times a couple of years ago now about how you can only write when you're home. And the piece was about you'd gone to another country which had a very different climate to what you were used to. And it took you a while to, I guess, sink in and get used to writing in that new place. Now that you've moved to Tasmania from Argentina and your home is different now, do you think that music helps you be able to drop into your writing state even if you're not in your normal quote-unquote home?
A lot, because I use it a lot to get the sense of the surroundings. Like I find myself a lot more walking around with the headphones and, getting ideas of that is something I wasn't doing that much. Still, I can't really write while I'm traveling. We're doing this with this interview while I'm in the Auckland Writers Festival, and I was planning to not be very social and not mingle to write. And I did write, but, deadlines of journalism that I write, I barely touched the novel. I need that space. What I found is that whatever I call home is the place that works for writing. I mean, I could write fairly good in Tasmania because it's my house. Even if it's, of course, I just move, I'm stressed and whatever, but I have the story in my head. I know what I'm doing and I'm comfortable there, but music definitely helps. Still, I can do it on the move, I can do it in a bar, I can do it in a hotel room. No, it's not really working. I think I could correct later when I have a draft, but when I'm in the creative process, no, I need a very, secluded kind of place.
Do you find inspiration when you're traveling in these different cities or countries that you visit?
And that, yes. Stories, different ways of seeing, new writers, not necessarily that I talk to, but that I find interesting and get the book, new visions, new ways of living. I mean, I don't know. Yes, every travel, even if it's for a few days and you don't move that much, opens your mind. And to me, it's very important because I'm a person that I'm not, as a writer, I'm not that bookish. I love books and I read all the time, but most of the inspiration comes from life and what people tell me and the observations I make. I'm not a very literary writer that way. I couldn't write from a writer's perspective, for example. Like there's so many novels that are, well, Stephen King does it good too, but he's a genius. But he can write, and he can do misery, for example.
Yes.
But I find the literary books with writers as the protagonists very tiresome, even when they're good. But the idea of a writer that, it's so removed from the world already that can only write about it from a writer, which are very few people.
Yeah.
Very few people are writers. So it's like you relate so little to other people that you're writing a novel about a writer that can't write. It's so boring. And
unless it's misery and
unless it's me. I mean, yeah. But it's still, I think it's the best writer writing about writers, and it's true.
Yeah, I spoke to another author. She still, by choice, she still has a full-time job, even though she doesn't have to. But her personal feeling about how she's crafting her work is she wants to be plugged into real life, like real people, and not lose that perspective of what her readers, what their lives are actually like, which you potentially can lose, I guess, because writing is very insular. And so I suppose if you're writing novels full time, it'd be quite easy to forget the experience of everyday life.
Yeah.
Just having a job, which it sucks sometimes.
But, yes. Yeah, but I still work as a journalist, and I still have the deadlines of journalism, and I like it.
How do you think your experience as a journalist influences your creative writing and vice versa?
I think journalism gives you two things, and for real, two things only that are very important to creative writing. One is discipline, that you have to disconnect, do the article, they can't wait for you, and you don't need that in creative writing. Maybe they can wait for you months, or you can do whatever you want. But it's some kind of self-discipline that tells you, well, okay, it's finished, it's over. And the switch on, like you can be on every day. I don't really like I don't do the 8 hours a day sitting for nothing. Creative writing sometimes seems to be about, no, I can live with 2 hours a day that are productive. And journalism is the same. You don't need a whole day for an article. You can write an article in 2 hours as long as it's publishable and has all the information. And that goes, then in creative writing, you have to do a lot of other things. But that first draft or that first idea, put down, quick, fresh, that I can do. And the second thing that it does to you, it keeps you awake. It keeps you curious. Like I choose, since I don't really need this job, I choose what I do. So in one of my freelance things at the moment, for example, is I'm 51, so it's like approaching weird stuff that you find offline with this age that could be very, normal to younger people, but trying to explain it to myself and to others. So it's like that's something I do. I write pieces about that. And I don't know, vertical dramas, for example, this 1 minute series that people are into now that is like so messed up. And I didn't know it existed. So I spent like, I don't know, a morning watching vertical dramas and learning about them, how much money they are making and what it involves. The fact that we are changing our perception of watching something horizontal to watching something vertical, and how is changed subjectivity and all things like that. I mean, trying to think about these things that I don't necessarily consume but are out there, so that it keeps your curiosity up to that. It gives you an antenna that I think you really need for creative writing, because the writer only has the writer, not only people. We have a set of obsessions and things we like, the certain subjectivity, and if you only play there, your playground is really small. Still going to be small, even if you have an antenna, because it's going to pass through that. But at least with an antenna, you can incorporate more things. And journalism gives you that, gives you the alert. Oh, that, shiny things. That's a shiny thing I want. Let's see if I can incorporate it. Because it's very easy to be lazy with your set of tools in creative writing.
Thinking about a lot of your short stories as well, they delve so deep into different local myths and legends, as well as actual crime cases that might have happened. Would you say that your abilities or your skills as a journalist allows you to look for the right or the interesting facts about these cases, or does that aid in your research if you're working on a story like that?
I think it gives you, I taught journalism too, it gives you like a nose. Of course, there's crimes every day, and in Buenos Aires where I lived, 15 million people living there, it was like 100 crimes a day, I don't know. But for some reason, in crime specifically, some crimes encapsulate something. And there's something about the social narrative that journalism does. Journalism is the first form of history, in a way. That for a number of reasons, not always, but they kind of train to know, this is some kind of crime that encapsulates something about where we are living that disturbs us. Even if they do it for purely morbid reasons, it happens. It's like that. And that I can do. Because I didn't work with that ever. I always did arts and culture journalism, except for a very, very short part at the beginning when you have to do anything that they want you to. But I worked in a paper with an old school, in an old school office, like they were in the 90s and early 2000s, and basically with working from home and stuff doesn't really exist as it did. And that environment, you get exposed to people that are completely different, even to sports writers that are there, watching the football or something, and it gives you that. And then the pagan myths and things, I think is an extension of my interest in everything fantastic. The mythology of our countries is not, Latin American countries, except Mexico maybe, and certain parts of the Caribbean, but it's not that obvious. It's not in the public conversation. It's still thought as superstition, lesser, or anthropology, touristic stuff. It's not that much everyday for the middle class. And I've always been very interested in popular stories, from pagan saints and things like that to urban legends. And I think it's been always a huge part of horror, because horror is a very popular genre in every sense. It's not just that people like it, but it has roots in popular. It's the stories we tell when we get together. It's the myth of around the corner. It's a girl that walks in the night there. It's very community kind of storytelling. So I'm really interested in that.
It's true, thinking around, even as children, how at sleepovers you would, put the torch on, sit in a circle and tell each other a scary story. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, there was one that was very enduring about the woman who used to put her hand under the bed each night to have her dog lick the hand to say goodnight. And then one night it wasn't the dog.
Yes.
Oh my God, that scared the bejesus out of me, the drip, drip, drip of the sound in the bathroom.
I think also what's interesting is that these are very international. And, this is, for me, was my childhood in the 80s, and it's the same everywhere. Like,
how does that travel? Like, how does one group of young children in the 80s end up telling the same, how does a group of children in the 90s telling the same story at sleepovers?
And sometimes across social classes too. That's kind of strange. I mean, it's not that, but many people consume it. Of course, even Spain has the same kind of things as Argentina, and obviously we are very different. Like, they are rich and we are not, for example, and we consume the same things. What we used to do a lot was in the mirror.
Yeah.
And saying something
like a Candyman or something.
Yeah, whatever it was in our version.
Yeah.
And it would appear there. Or there was another one that I was very scared about. A friend of mine, a boy, told me that, and that what appeared was your gravestone with the date of your death. And I never dared to do it, but he did, and he was very spooked, or he pretended to be, because there was also that element of, I don't know, the theatrical kind of thing. Like, I think we really fed on that.
Yeah.
It was not just that night. It was the days after that night. I heard that something happened. We awoke in something.
In primary school, I remember I know you talk a lot about horror in the daytime.
Yeah.
And there was this story that we used to tell when I was like 6 or 7 about this bunch of bushes at the back of our playground field, and that it was a haunted forest. And like if you walked into these bushes, you'd basically disappear, and it was this haunted. And we all had this was just this enduring story about this hedge at the back of the playground. But we were all so petrified of it in broad daylight. Around all our friends. And I remember one day my friend and I dared to run through this bush and run to the other side, and I remember it so clearly even now, just how terrified I was to do that. And it's just insane, like the minds of children. And where do we even get that from? Like, because I don't know, it's not like at the age of 6 my mum was letting me watch horror movies. It's like we just invent these stories, or we just tell these stories to each other anyway.
Or you can tell what's creepy. I remember I went to Catholic school. I'm not religious now, but I was a fervent Catholic until I was 12 or 13. And I think what I really like about the narrative of the Bible was that it's insanely creepy. It's gore. It's insane. I remember reading the stories. The Old Testament is all crazy. But in the New Testament, there are things that Jesus expelling the demons, talking to the possessed man. It was like, what? Getting Lazarus out of the grave. Lazarus has been dead for 3 days, not 1 second. The man is putrid. It is described like that in the book. And we had to go. We didn't have to. My school was a Catholic school, but it was kind of relaxed. And you could go once or not, but it was once a month to Mass in a church that was in the school. Very, very, very beautiful neo-Gothic chapel. Small but gorgeous. And we were absolutely fascinated. But the fact that the priest was saying, this is the body of Christ and this is the blood of Christ. There was wine, but we didn't know that. And I remember we never did it, but we planned excursions after hours to the church, to get inside the church and get to that cup to see if it was blood or not, and taste it, because we were like, we want to taste the blood of Christ. Like, this is vampiric stuff. We were 8.
Yeah, it is creepy. I was a Catholic growing up as well, and I do remember so many of the Catholic rituals are so,
I know,
pagan, I want to say.
Yes. And the crucifixion, it's a whole people worshipping a man tortured and crucified and dead in a cross.
And then he rose again.
And then
came back from the dead.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. If you actually think about the stories in the Bible, it's not very wholesome.
No, I love them because of that.
Yeah.
My mother was appalled.
How does your experience writing horror differ from other genres?
I think other genres, my first two novels are realistic novels. I think I didn't know how to do horror at that point because I really want to do it, but I didn't know how. And of course, there's other things that I really enjoy reading and I love. So, that's what I could do. But I always hoped to write horror because to me, and I think this is the answer, it was the language in which I could say what I wanted to say and interpret feelings, reality, storytelling. It wasn't through realism or sci-fi or crime narrative or essays no, it was through horror. That was my language. If I wanted to, for example, I wanted to talk about mental health. That seems very dry to say like that, but I wanted to write about my anxieties, feeling crazy, the fact that me and my friends were doing a lot of drugs, the fact that we were abusing our bodies, all that kind of things. But I didn't want to do a memoir. I didn't want to do a realistic generational narrative. I didn't want to do an investigation. I didn't want to do a sci-fi thing that was, implanted chips in the heads to open the minds. No, I wanted to talk about it as a shift in reality, as a body horror. That was how it felt. So always the things I wanted to talk about were through horror. I found it the best medium, the best genre to talk about the things I care about was always horror. And horror in the sense that, to me, the ghost that is there is real. It's not a metaphor of something. If I wanted to write a metaphor or something, I would write other things or a metaphor. No, the ghost is real, but of course it does represent things. The thing is that a ghost is real because it's in the language. It doesn't have to be, if you believe in ghosts and they're supernatural, they're real too. The beliefs makes it real. The fact that the word exists. If someone say, I see ghosts exist. You can touch sadness and you feel sad anyway. And to me, ghost is memory. Ghost is something that is trapped into something. It could be also someone that came from the dead in the literal sense, or in the in the representing that thing that is not over, that has to finish something. So that's what set it apart. And also it's fun. It's a lot of fun. I mean, I have fun reading horror, and I have fun watching movies, and I have fun writing.
You write about heat a lot as a sensory experience in your work. There's kind of two parts to this question, because I'm very interested in how you write about Buenos Aires and how visceral it is, and the city itself actually almost feels like a character to me. And normally in horror, the classic trope is cold, right, and a drop in temperature when something's changing, but yours is kind of the opposite. Can you talk a little bit about that choice to really focus on heat as a strong sensory element in your work?
Yeah. First, Buenos Aires, it's a character in my stories. Big cities to me are formidable characters. Basically, they have a lot of moods. So you can, in a big city, you experience everything. And it's always intense. It's always loud. That is something that it's very, to what I write, it suits my writing a lot, a city like that. But the heat. I mean, when I started writing horror, most of the horror was in the cold. And I haven't saw snow 3 times in my life.
Really?
Once in Iceland and 2 times in Patagonia in Argentina, where it snows. Even now that I moved to, in the part that I moved in Tasmania, doesn't snow. So the experience of cold and fear, I don't really get it. And when I was doing like the mental translation of what should be the stuff that I put in my horror, one of the things was the atmosphere. I couldn't write a story that happened in the cold because there's nothing particularly scary about cold for me, about cold weather at all, because nothing that ever happened that was scary in my experience, it's in the cold. And even you can say, well, the dead body is cold, yeah, but in my experience, what's scary about the dead body is how easily it gets putrid in the heat. And Buenos Aires is not a tropical city, but it's hot, and it gets very hot in the summer, and it gets pandemonium hot in the summer. And what you get is not coldness but darkness, and a darkness that is artificial because of the blackouts. To me, it's not the night of the northern hemisphere woods that is scary, or if you wish, the early nights of Patagonia or the south here. let's say, with the woods and stuff. To me, darkness in a big city is the blackout. Massive blackout, third world city. People from the first world get offended when I call ourselves third world, but we are. It's all right. We have to call things by the most, to me, blunt name to change them, because otherwise you kind of change the way you name something and it doesn't seem that it's bad. And it's bad, So in the summer, you have to expect in a city like that, in any third world city, but Buenos Aires is one of the cases, to have blackouts of days in the dark, in the heat. And to me, that's oppressive, that's scary, that gives you the feeling of being trapped. All those kinds of things that when you read narrative from the north gives the cabin in the woods with the blizzard around. I don't feel that. What I feel is the candle at 3 a.m. in a big city and you not knowing what that noise outside, if it's your neighbors that are being crazy, if it's someone creeping in the dark, what those candles are, if they're praying, if they are light, if this is a ceremony. I mean, it's extremely creepy. I mean, the first massive blackouts are experienced in Argentina. It was not just in Buenos Aires. Those days it was 89. There was hyperinflation, like in Germany in the 30s. 1,000% inflation a year. What is that? And
that is crazy.
I know. And at some point it was decided we had to save energy as a country. So I clearly remember that. I think it's in one of the stories. The Minister of Production or Energy or whatever it's called, they change the name of those ministries all the time. But the guy was with a lamp on TV announcing how the blackouts were going to be. It was like, I think it was every night. I can't remember, but it was 12 hours a day for months. No TV, nothing. And we were spending days, I remember it was very hot. And we were spending days we lived in a building, and we were spending the stairs that were quite dark were cooler. So we stayed there and we were there telling each other stories, of course, horror stories and stuff. And to me, that is the experience of urban horror that I knew about. And when I decided to do the translation, I was reading all these amazing writers. It was like, okay, but I can't do this because I don't know anything about this. I don't know what it is to be isolated in a cabin in Maine. I have nothing that relates to me to that. And it's not scary to me, but this is.
Yeah, heat can be so claustrophobic, right? Like, to your point too, how it can speed up decay in anything.
Yeah.
But cold can preserve it.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting juxtaposition. And
it's scary too. Like you see something like The Thing, for example, there is that thing that is preserved in the cold. But there's an American genre that is not exactly horror, but it's very close to horror, that really helped me understanding this. I was Southern Gothic.
I do like Southern Gothic.
When I started to read Southern Gothic, Flannery O'Connor, many women there, Catherine Ann Porter, of course Faulkner, later Cormac McCarthy, it's not horror, but the things that happen and that idea of the heat as a god that rules over you, that rules the day, that rules how the day is spent, that you can't get away from, that defines your life also. That there's a part in The Sound of the Fury, the last part, where one of the brothers has a tremendous headache and is under the sun. And I remember reading that and saying, God, this is how it is. This is how it is. To feel a headache under a sun that is as cruel as sun like that can be, it's body horror. It's this, to me, it's the same as when you read these narratives of the people in the snow that are slowly getting numb and can reach and are running from whatever is chasing them, where in the heat, if you think about it, it's the same. You can't move. You don't have the resistance. This thing is moving in the swamp, the thing that is kind of static. All this also in Southern horror, in Southern Gothic, the notion of something that can't change. Of course, in the American South, what can change in a way is the traditional values and reactionary values of the South of the United States are very oppressive. And the history, of course, is a place that is damned. And that idea really worked for me in understanding the bridge of how to move that tradition of horror from the Northern Hemisphere and bring it here and then make it South American, and not through also through magic realism, because magic realism is connected to Southern Gothic. But it's the kind of, how can I say, it's the kind of very voluptuous part of Southern Gothic. What I wanted to capture, and many writers from South America are doing that, is getting that other part, the nasty, dirty, cruel, static, damned part, not the Baroque part. I read maybe not Agustina, but other writers, like there's a Cuban writer called Elaine Villar that she's going to be translated soon, and she the way she writes about the jungle as a voracious thing, because the jungle is that you throw something in the jungle, disappears in 5 minutes.
The jungle is scary. Like,
it is.
That scares me. Not only could you get lost, but there are so many things that could kill you in the jungle.
Yeah, and even the weather, you throw something there, it gets putrid in 5 seconds, it's eaten by animals in 5 seconds.
You didn't exist. You go in there, you cease to exist.
It's a great place to disappear. She gets that in a way that I've never read before of someone. She's a bit younger than me, but let's say of my generation of writers.
Oh my goodness, I look forward to reading that when it's translated. Just thinking about Buenos Aires again, you managed to make it simultaneously both bleak and oppressive with the heat and the descriptions of poverty and the extreme gap between class, the haves and the haves not. But it still has the strong, vibrant sense of energy and life about it. And I'm curious about how you balance that, like how you manage to turn a city into something so multifaceted that it makes me want to visit it, even despite all of the negatives about it.
I think it has a lot to do with the fact that I really love the city. I love Buenos Aires, but I really, in general, I really like big cities. I'm very comfortable in big cities. I get tired of them. They are absolutely exhausting and they can make you crazy, but I feel comfortable. I'm never scared. And I think they are, as machines for the living, let's say, is the best one that tells you can't hide things in a city. It's very strange to think about it, but in a small, cute town, you can hide things under order, under trying not to show up too much in everywhere. But in a city, cities explode. There's no way. And the bigger the city, the more explosion there is. You can't hide what's unjust, unfair, and socially terrible, tragic about Buenos Aires or New York or London, because you can. And also you can repress the creativity that is there, the diversity, because if you live in a small town and you're different, you have to go. And there's no place like a city to hide or to be seen. It's everything there, even the contradictions and even the wish of going away forever or staying forever there. But I always enjoy the narrative about the city, reading about cities, how writers make city characters. And I think some cities in the world are very strong characters. Like, to me, London is a character. Moscow is a character. It's something. So many things, so many narratives have been there that you feel. Paris too, Mexico City,
Edinburgh.
It's a character. If you say Edinburgh, something comes to you. Whatever comes to you, but something comes to you. And the bigger the city and the more diverse, more things come to your mind. Rio de Janeiro, it's a character. And of course you're attracted to it because it's so complex and you want to know what's going on there. And I think even if I choose a lot of the horrific things that happen in Buenos Aires, you can really see that that's not the whole story. That's a partial vision of it. Also, most of the time I take the narrator is not the protagonist. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's the witness of something. And I think that gives you the impression that the narrator, lives in a different world and is looking through the window at this thing. That could be a horrific thing, but it's not necessarily hers. And she's surprised too. I say her because they're mostly women, but she's surprised too. So I think that gives you the impression as a reader that she lives in somewhere different, maybe closer to your reality, and is looking at that. I think in a story like The Dirty Kid, it's very clear that she decided to move there, but that's not her place. Let's say she could be somewhere else. So even if she doesn't mention other places in the city, you know that they exist because she's not the protagonist. She's just watching the lives of these people to the point where she's basically expelled by these people and by this part of the city. It's like, let us live our life here. You're not from here. And so that experience of outside looking in, I think gives you the impression that Buenos Aires is not that. This is people looking at some places.
Now that you've moved to Tasmania quite recently, will you continue to write your stories based primarily in Argentina, or do you think you'll explore basing stories in and around Tasmania and Australia?
Now I have planned a couple of books. One book that I'm writing now is 100% Argentina and a bit in the US because of one of the characters moves there, but still it's the same continent. To me, the US is not that. Australia is very different to Latin America, but not really the US. The US is the same continent and there's many Latinos. Like the last time I've been there, I never spoke in English.
Really?
No.
Wow.
Because I went to Dallas in Texas and everybody speaks Spanish. And then went to New York, and in New York everybody speaks Spanish.
Yeah.
Every 1 or 3 people speak Spanish, so you don't really need to. It's quite amazing.
That is amazing. I did not expect that.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, so it's very close. And many Latin American people want to live there or have family there, have an aunt that lived there, moved back. I mean, you have a relationship that's very near. So one character lives there in a certain circumstance, but it's just that, but it's 100%. And then I already have the draft of 2 others. One is a non-specific place, but everybody is kind of related to Argentina or something. And the third one is an Argentinian girl, very much in love with a French actor that dies, and she gets obsessed and wants to reclaim the body. I told you the whole story. But
sounds great.
And but she meets him in a film festival in Buenos Aires, gets obsessed there. He goes and dies, and she goes crazy. And there's a lot of invented movies, and it would be one of my weirdest things, I guess.
Oh, that sounds so excellent, though.
So that is work for a couple of years. So after that, I don't know. For now, I'm working in that. Probably still would be like probably the outside looking in thing, because I'm a recent immigrant, but I'm not young. Well, I'm still young as an adult, but I'm not a kid. So the way I look at things are different, I guess, more practical. Maybe I would explore writing about it, but weirdly from a journalistic point of view, to understand it more. I don't really get the sensibility yet.
It's so different.
It's so different. And they do things that are so different, beginning with the time where they eat here. To me, it's insane to eat at 7 p.m. It's insane. We eat at 10.
Really?
Yeah.
That's bedtime.
Yeah.
That's bedtime.
I know. So it's the other day with Paul, with my partner, we are trying to, blend in.
Yes.
So, and he's Australian, but he's been outside forever. So the first month, we were having dinner. Of course, when we go out for dinner, it has to be early. But sometimes we stay like up to 11 or 12 and we're hungry. And we go to bed hungry. But
that's sad.
But we are trying at home. We were like, okay, let's try to eat he is the one that cooks. He starts cooking at 7 to eat at 8. And one time I see him and he's on the computer and it's 8:30 and I say, oh, whatever. And I listen that he gets up and goes to the kitchen and it's 9 something. And we started moving the time. And one day we're having dinner at 10:30, I remember. And we looked at each other and we were like, we are the only people on this island voluntarily having a dinner at this time, because maybe someone that is working at night or something but voluntarily, like living like a normal suburban life.
That's so funny. When I went to France, I remember we were staying with some family friends and I could not believe the way that they had their dinners. Like, not only were they so late, and this was in summer as well and during a heat wave, so it was 40 degrees, so we would eat at like 11 p.m. and it was still light. They also had dinner broken up into courses. So here in New Zealand, if you're having a roast dinner, for example, then you pile your plate up with everything. You just eat it in one go. But in France, they would serve the salads first, and you'd eat your salad, and then you'd have the meat and you'd eat the meat, and then you might have the vegetables at the end, and then they bring out the wine and the cheese.
Yeah.
There's no dessert, and that goes on until
forever.
11.
Yeah.
It was so strange. To be honest, I loved it. The food was so much better as well. The entire experience was better, but it was so, so strange. Just the complete difference between cultures of how we
Yeah,
have
and
our dinner.
I think that changes the subjectivity in such a big way, because if I'm telling a story, to me, something that happens at midnight is not late. It's not middle of the night. It's after dinner. It's absolutely normal.
That adds a lot of context, I think.
Exactly. So many things that happen in my books that are in the middle of the night or something are not supposed to be in the middle of the night. It's full of, you have to imagine that situation with a lot of people awake. You can call anyone on the phone.
My goodness.
I don't know. My mom is in Buenos Aires still, and they're having some heavy rain and floods there, and I call her because she's terrified of her house gets flooded a lot. And I had to stay very late last night until midnight here to call her on a reasonable hour there. Reasonable hour for her is 10 in the morning, because before she's sleeping. And it's not just now because she's old. This is
your routine.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and that changed the subjectivity a lot about what is going out and what's a wild thing to do, you know?
This is a bit of a pivot, but now I'm interested in your routine, given that that's so different. Do you prefer to write in the morning or the afternoon? Do you have a set time?
It changes, but now in the morning, but not really morning, like 9, you know, having breakfast at 9 and then a good couple of hours there. Then in the afternoon, let it roast, and then maybe at night after dinner sometimes look at it.
I laughed when we were emailing and I was asking what time and you said early. And so I was thinking, like 8 a.m., like 7 or 8 a.m. And like, okay, because I've done interviews that early. And then when you said, oh no, I'm South American, like 10 or 11, I was like, thank God.
Yeah.
It made me laugh very much. So obviously in the translated fictions that we have of yours, the first 2 were the short stories collections, which are amazing. I'm very interested in how you went from writing short stories to writing this absolutely humongous tome. My copy is 724 pages long, and that could not be further from the format that, you know, you're used to. So why did you decide to write such a massive novel, which, by the way, is so beloved? I loved it, and when I shared on my Instagram page that I was reading it, you would not believe how inundated I got with messages from people saying it's their favorite book of all time. They reread it every year. Like, it's incredible. But what was the instigator for you, I guess, in writing that one?
I think I wanted the experience of the long form, because I started writing novels. They're not that long, must be in 300 pages and not small. Anyway, they're normal sized for publish. And I've been writing, at that point I was writing short stories for a long time, like I don't know, 6 years or something like that, and I really missed that feeling of being in a novel, that it's very consuming in your mind, and you're very attached to the characters. There's something about when you're into fiction and creating fiction that you really like to spend time with your creations in a certain world, and with certain characters, with a certain story. And the short story doesn't give you that. Short story is more technical, it's fast, you're there very little, you don't get to revisit it. So I really longed for that. I didn't know it was going to be so long. But I made a structure first. It was a very ambitious structure, and then I have to change a bit. So I basically had these 4 parts. It's the same 4 parts that the novel is there. And I started writing in general, and I was like, just throwing things. So this is for the first part, this is for the second part, this is for the third part. And then when I looked at it all, it was very long. It had many tangents, and I decided to go for it. But at first it was, I had the story in my head, and I said, this is a good story to write a novel, because the characters came first. It was Juan and the kid, the couple, basically. Those 3, that weird family, and the dynamics of that family. And it started from there. Very quickly, I decided, okay, you're dead with Rosario, like you go off. And I stayed with the kid and the father, and the whole trip at the beginning is the first I wrote, because I needed to know how communicated between each other and what was going on there, how was Juan, not only how to, not those things as to write a man or whatever. I think a writer can more or less write anything, unless you're not, was not trying to write a realistic guy, by a guy that is a medium that has a certain, characteristics or whatever. But the relationship with the kid had to be very human, very genuine, and very realistic in many ways, though it was going to be very weird. But it had to be protective, and it had to be brutal, and it had to be sexy, and the kid had to be bright, but he had to be a kid. He had to believe that he was little. He could be a bit more mature than the normal 5-year-old, but not much, because he's only 5 or 6. And so I wrote that, and that was so enjoyable to spend many, many days, maybe more than a month with them, and choosing there's lots of scenes that are not there. And I really enjoyed it. I wrote it quite quickly. It was, for what it is, it was a year or something. But I thought about it a lot before. When I was writing the stories, it was always in the back of my mind, that story.
That's a good segue, because I did notice as I was reading it, there were quite a few anecdotes or fragments throughout of stories that provided backstory to certain parts of the book that were parts of stories in your short story collections. Was it always sort of tickling the back of your brain while you were working on those other short stories?
In the second volume, in Things We Lost in the Fire, yeah. But Adela's house is more or less transported to the novel, but more or less no, is transported to the novel. That short story. It was because in the novel I needed a house that did something similar as that house did, that basically eats people. You get inside the house is different from the outside, that what it is inside, and you get lost there. And it's a place that Juan uses for his purposes. So when I started writing that, I said, oh, no. I wrote this already. Let's bring that house. But it was the early stages of the novel. So I thought, what if I bring the house and the girl? Doesn't have to be the same girl. It's like a multiverse kind of thing. I kept the name. I kept the fact that she has only one arm. Of course, the reasons in the short story of how she lost the arm are not known, or she was born like that. And in the novel, you quickly know how she lost it. So I decided to do this multiverse thing. I'm very, I love sagas and comic books. So to me, it was a very tongue-in-cheek, funny thing to do. And I put it there, and I realized that house always belongs to the novel, and and many other things, especially the body horror. Like there's a short story that is very erotic about a woman that is obsessed with heartbeats, and clearly that is one of the characteristics of Juan, that has the heart disease. So there's it was always lingering there, but I was not ready to write it. So the kind of obsessions that were later expanded in the novel were brewing there in short stories that sometimes have nothing to do with that, because that story, it's a fetishistic horror story, erotic. It has not much to do with the mystic thing that has in the novel. But,
I loved the multiverse element of it. It felt like a little puzzle, or even a reward as a reader, having read your short story collections. It felt like a little thrill to see a nod to those other short stories. When you're writing any of your works, from short form to long form, do you know where you're going with the plot and the intricacies? I know you said you mapped out the structure for Our Share of Night, but if you're sitting down to write a short story even, do you know from start to finish kind of where you want to go, or does it sort of reveal itself to you as you're working?
A short story, I kind of know the plot, but what I don't know is what reveals itself is the point of view. I don't know, the vibe of it. I can have a short story. Sometimes I know that, for example, I want it to be in this first person. There's many short stories that I know that I do that are kind of in the first person, that are kind of similar, because I'm exploring like the same thing. I think in what's the name in English? Is No Flesh Over Our Bones. That is the girl that is in love with a skull. That first person, slightly crazed narrator that talks about the body and the body of a woman appears a bit in Metamorphosis. That is the woman that has a hysterectomy and reclaims her womb. It's kind of the same kind of thing. But in others, I have, this is what's going to happen, and it ends here. But when I write it, I hesitate a lot. I start in the first person and no. Has to be in the, and then it shifts. Who is talking, from which point of view, what's the atmosphere, that reveals itself. But the plot, not so much. But in short stories, the plot doesn't matter that much, I think. It's more in the modern short story. Of course, it's important, but it's not. I don't think they're plot driven anymore. They're narrative driven. That is another thing, because I don't like short stories have a punchline, or they are very amazingly technical. Say, this happened, and I don't know, these tricks.
Yeah,
I don't really like them anymore, and I'm very partial to some kind of short fiction, especially written in English, like George Saunders and people like that are really really explore the short form, and sometimes it look like fragments. They have no endings. It's like a sensation. It's short form, but that doesn't have to be like the classical introduction, plot, and twist. The twist just kills me.
What do you hope readers take away from your short work? What is your intention for the reader?
It's really difficult because I don't think about the reader that much when I write. But as myself, as a reader, what I think I want them to have the impression that you get from a song, something that is kind of a journey. And sometimes a song really hits with you and you adopt it and keep on singing it. And sometimes there's something really strange about it, but you go back to it to be sure if you like it. Like that kind of exploration that it's a bit abstract. And but certainly not a bit of a shock too. Yeah. And I want them to be funny in parts, horrifying, everything, but sometimes funny, deadpan funny. Maybe not ha ha ha, but something
dry.
Something dry, yeah.
Thinking about short stories as a form in general, you spoke at the Writers' Festival around how there is a bit more of a skew towards short fiction in Argentina versus the novel. How have you found the reception of your short story collections in mainstream publishing, where we don't tend to celebrate the short form as much?
Well, even if there's more of a tradition in Argentina for the short story, it's not really in Spanish as a language.
Right.
In other countries. So they always resist the short story. But I think what happened with me and with other writers like Samantha Schwebling, for example. Samantha is from Argentina too, that she won the National Book Award with short stories in the US.
I've read Fever Dream, which I absolutely loved.
It's amazing.
I think about it all the time.
It's amazing, and it's a novel, but it's short form. I mean, it's a novella. If she hadn't been advised, this is something I don't know if I should say, but I know it, by people around her, and that she should publish it on its own because it was very powerful, she would put it on the book because she thinks of herself as a short story writer. So that would be, I don't know, the longest story in a short, the central piece on a short story book. And in her last book, that is very, very good, but there is one story in particular that is like wow. And I will, when this cycle is finished, I will say to her, Samantha, you should have really published that on its own, like you did with Fever Dream, expanding it a bit maybe. But she's a master of the short form. And what started to happen, I think, when we're talking about publishing and business, is that a lot of writers started to appear that have very powerful books in the short form, And I think other thing that is happening now, and I see it a lot with we're talking about Tori Peters, for example. She has The Transition Baby, that is a novel, and then she's very busy because that novel was very successful, and the publishers demand more from her, and her second book is the short stories, and the short stories are amazing. So sometimes what happens with the demands of publishing and what people like and all these kind of things that don't really have to do with the writer really impose kind of a form that maybe the publishers and the markets don't really embrace, but they can't have it any other way because they want Samantha or they want me to write a novel, and we are mainly, I don't think as myself as a mainly short story writer, but my short stories do good and they don't know why.
They're so good.
No, but they don't know why. And they're like, but people supposedly don't read short stories. Well, I don't know if they don't read short stories. In horror especially. Like most of the horror writers everywhere have the cosmic horror crowd that is massive. Lovecraft doesn't have a novel. Like you're writing in a subgenre where your lord never wrote a novel. And there's a lot of peripheric writers in horror that write short stories that are amazing. Like in Hungary, Attila Veres, and there's many. So they kind of, I think publishing kind of have to accept that it's not the second best thing, the short story, that it could be the main thing. Still they ask me for a novel,
really,
but of course, but they are but they are okay.
It's so interesting to me because I feel like there was something that was said during your session with Kirsty Gunn as well. I don't recall, I think might have even been an audience question, but there does seem to be this sense that if you're going to spend your time reading a book, you're the value of reading a novel is greater than reading a short story.
Yeah, it's insane because it's not understanding how you read short stories. You can't read a book of short stories in a day. You can't, because it's too much. So you maybe read one or two and you have to think about it because they're closed narratives. They are not going, it's finished. So that is like watching a movie. I think it has to do a lot also with, I love some TV series, but the binging aspect of it, of how we consume art in general. The same happens with even with art exhibition. Like, I don't know, if an artist puts like 15 paintings, like it's small, well, 15 paintings, man, it's a lot.
It's a lot if you're spending so much time creating a single one.
Exactly. Not everything can be a retrospective, but that's also that happened in the art world. For example, that you have the massive galleries doing the retrospective of this and that, and you have like, I don't know, 100, they put everything, the little papers, the thingy, the beret that they use, I mean, and that is like the novel of art. And in visual art, that it's the thing that is happening also with movies, even if we still watch movies, but you have the TV series, that why do they have to be 12 seasons?
Oh, I know. Oh my God. And it gets worse. Like
I know.
It just gets worse and worse.
All of them get worse. So why is no one sitting there and saying, hello, let's make a new one? Because clearly everybody's complaining, and they are right, because it's bad. This just keep it at that. And it's this thing that is like, I don't know where it ends, because who are the people that are demanding more? And why are you listening to that people anyway? It's a bit of an echo chamber. And there was a girl that asked if it has something to do with capitalism. I understand that kind of academic thinking about things. I don't think it's that. I don't think the market and the dominance of the market, it's one form of capitalism that is dominant now with the digital experience and the social media. So it's a way of perceiving the world that is not necessarily capitalism, because capitalism is something that we have to acknowledge also, listening maybe to the creatives from other parts of the world. Is not the same everywhere. Like I keep telling people that my main culture shock, now not that I'm living, because more or less I'm used to it. My main culture shock when I came with my partner to Australia the first time was going to a supermarket and basically not understanding why there was 50 different yogurts. And it was so shocking to me that I couldn't buy one. And I can't explain, it's not disturbing bad, but it's just disturbing enough that you don't know what to pick, because it's so many options, and you feel that you're going to be forever there trapped because they're throwing so much at you.
And whichever one you choose, it's going to be the wrong one. You should have chosen the other one.
And I'm there in the supermarket remembering these people have all these possibilities and all this production that we can't even imagine in my country, and they made themselves this trap that they have to spend 25 minutes choosing things that
yogurt
they don't need. And it was like, wow. But I was disturbed because I didn't know why, and that is better than the price. And in Argentina, you have 10 yogurts, okay? And that's it. And that's it. And maybe you have, is one vanilla. There's not many things. Or clothes. Like the amount of clothes. When I was listening, when I remember this pile of clothes in the Atacama Desert, in Ghana, like the central countries, the richer countries are getting rid of clothes, and people in the periphery countries are not really using them because we don't need that many, because we're not used to wear something and throw it away. We can use something for years. So it's not like they receive these piles of clothes and they are happy wearing them because we are not naked. You know? So this is all contamination, and this is so very post-apocalyptic to have these mountains of clothes that are basically polyester. Why? I mean, I remember in Launceston is small, and we went to buy clothes there in a shop, and there was so many that I was like, who is wearing this in Launceston? There's 100,000 people. And this is a lot. And they're all in sale, and you can dress the town 3 times with one shop, and it's like, what's going on? So it's not the same capitalism, you know? And clothes are very cheap here, amazingly expensive in Argentina. So also sometimes when there's also the discussion about how bad is capitalism and stuff, I feel sometimes like I would like to experience it a bit in South America and then let me tell how it is and then we can get rid of it. But we got all the bad with none of the good. So I'm very suspicious with someone that lives in a richer country. I don't even say more privileged because everything comes with a price, but richer country complaining a lot about things and things like, oh, I have to change my car every year. I'm like, oh my God. And we have no idea what is to not ever being able to buy a car. So we have to really think about what we are talking, because sometimes I feel I don't get offended, but I'm like, really? Are you sure you want this? Because I can tell you what it is and it's not cool.
Yeah.
So I don't think the long form is related. No, I think it's related to the necessity of people for make a value of their money, like a very monetized society, and also with instant gratification. A novel will give you an ending. It's long. You can spend days with it. It's a bit of thinking about it like you're thinking of a good pair of jeans. And maybe a short story is a piece of clothing that you can only wear once.
I've experienced in the Bookstagram world, there is this huge pressure. And again, who's applying this pressure? I don't know.
I don't know.
But there's this massive pressure to focus on reading the largest quantity of books that you can. It's like there are literally people who, we're in May, have already read 70 to 100 books this year. And this weekend, every year at the Writers' Festival, gives me like a reality check. And this weekend I thought that I was pushing back against that and focusing on reading quality and what I want to and taking my time. I realized I wasn't, that I was also getting sucked back into that pressure to just read, because the more you read, the better, quote in quotations, the better you look.
Yeah.
It's so stupid. And I do wonder if in a large part of the online book world, if almost short stories are viewed as like, well, you're technically reading, say, 10 stories, but it's only one book. And like,
I know, yeah.
I can't count that as 10 separate books, so it's not worth my time. I'm totally speculating on it, but I definitely feel like...
Yeah, it could be. Yeah.
Yeah. And also,
what I don't understand is why they don't lie. Like I would show my stack, I don't mind, with all the books I bought, not read.
Yes.
And say, this is all the books I read. If it's a competition...
It's so weird too. Because why? Like, why is this a thing? Why is this a competition? And I feel like short stories do ask more of you, because it's not fluff, if you will. Like, it's not, no shade against fluffy writing. I've got a few romance books on my shelf if I want something that I just feel like reading.
Yeah.
But if I'm reading a short story, I'm choosing to read it because I want to be challenged.
Yeah.
And maybe it's that it asks too much and we don't want to be challenged as much. But all my favorite books that I have are short story collections now. Reservoir Bitches, which I've got up there, which was one of the greatest things I've ever read. I just loved it so much. And I often find I return to short story collections more often than I return to novels.
Yeah, because you don't really, there's other things to remember in a short story. Yeah, it's basically 10 novels.
Do you feel any pressure with your next novel off the success of Our Share of Night?
You always feel a pressure. That's undeniable. But I don't exactly know, hopefully. I mean, unluckily, in a way, I don't have any plan. I mean, I feel the pressure, but I don't know what to do different to feed that pressure. So in that, I'm kind of relieved. Like I'm writing the novel I want to write. I know there will be a lot of people that will say, "Oh, Share Night is better." But I think that will happen in any case, because it's one of those things.
Can't please everyone, right?
No, and it's one of those things when a novel makes certain waves, even if it's just, a lake, then it's always going to be some kind of disappointment. But I do care, but there's nothing I can do, so it's okay.
I would love to know, of the horror tropes, do you have a favorite?
Yeah, hauntings in general. Haunted house, ghosts, haunted people.
I loved what you said, by the way, the other day about how a haunted house is also a ghost.
Yeah.
That was very thought-provoking to me.
Yeah, it is. That is my favorite because the eerie, all the other things that really I care about, and a lot in horror as a more cerebral thing, like it's the liminal spaces, the reality that is not real, all those kinds of things I think are there in the haunting. A haunted house is a liminal space between worlds. A ghost is reality broken because it's something that should not supposed to be there. It's sinister. Everything. Yeah, it's my favorite.
And what about what you would like to see more of in horror across art? So both in fiction and television, film. Is there anything you would really love to see?
Better folk horror. Because folk horror, I say better because folk horror is something very easy to do in a very crowd-pleasing touristic place. It's like I grab this myth, I kind of move it around a bit, I put it in a rural community, that's it. No, like better, real folk horror. What is the stories of folk stories that you find yourselves around that are syncretic at this point, that have to do with religion and have to do with mythology, that thing. Religious horror too. I love religious horror. I mean, The Exorcist, Rosemary's Baby, those books of the 70s that are, at the same time with Satanic Panic, brilliant.
I have never been able to get my hands on a copy of Rosemary's Baby.
Really?
I'm literally dying for it. I got it saved as like a secondhand search on our buy and sell website here. I look in the bookstore all the time. I can't even get it on Kindle. It's not even a Kindle. It's driving me insane. It's so high on my list of...
It's an amazing book.
I desperately want to read it. Have you read any of his other work?
I don't think so.
He's got other stuff, but it doesn't seem to have the same...
No, he was a very popular writer. I think that The Children of Brazil... But he was a very popular writer that took on, whatever was trendy at that moment, but he nailed it there. Sometimes very popular fiction writers in general just nail it.
Yeah.
And he did. But yeah, folk horror, religious horror is something I would like to read. Very well done. I mean, like... because when it's well done, like in Lamb and things like that, it's terrifying. Because it really comes from a place that we all know about. Those old stories, they're still there. There's a mystery to the places we have. And I think as long as the planet is dying, it's more eerie.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of the swan songs of humanity and of the planet that are mad at you. Yeah. So I think that without going into eco horror, that is kind of a very publicity kind of trope, that the eco horror is that, because that is like the memory of the land, and the memory of the land now is totally haunted because it's like, what are you doing, man?
I know, not learning from the past.
Yes.
That's for damn sure. Like,
yes. I just want to, so we finish something that came to my mind because they asked me for an article about the thylacine, of course, because I'm living in Tasmania, so the first thing that comes to mind to people outside in Europe and I said, write something about the Tasmanian tiger. And I was reading and I realized two things. First, it's the first animal that we have an image of the last specimen. We know when the species died. We know. That's that little video where the thylacine opens the mouth in almost a 90 degrees. That's the last one. We saw it die in it's like the video of Elisa Lam in LA.
Yeah.
It's those kinds of things that the ghostly nature of film that we didn't have before, because we don't have a mammoth, we don't have a dodo. But this thing, we saw it, and he looks you in the eye and he says to you, you killed me, man. And thylacine lived 40,000 years in Tasmania. 40,000 years in Tasmania with the Aboriginals. And when the British came, it lived 127.
Oh, it's so shameful.
I mean, 40,000 and 127.
Shameful.
And, it's what I was going to tell you, is that it's the very obvious thing they ask you to write when you move to Tasmania. But when you get to the story, and I mean, I'm doing it for work, but when you get to the story and you realize this is like, that is such a metaphor to what we've done.
Yeah. Oh, it's so devastating, really. Like, just the speed with which humans ruin things. I recently went down a rabbit hole of extinction level events, as one does, and I'm very interested in how the earth reclaims itself. That fascinates me. And I recently went down a rabbit hole about the Great Dying, which was this period 30 million years before the dinosaurs, where Earth was all interconnected as Pangea before it broke into separate continents. And how what happened, because it was just one massive land, it became superheated in the center because of the pressure from the building, heat from the mantle, and no water could get into the center of it. And it basically exploded, and it was a global volcanic event and wiped out 96% of living beings at that time. And then 30 million years went by, and slowly but surely the Earth began to recover itself, and then we had the dinosaur age, and then the meteor hit and wiped them out, and then slowly but surely the Earth reclaimed itself again, and then here humans are. And it brings comfort to me knowing that ultimately the Earth will be fine without us. Like, we are such a blip on the spectrum of time for this planet, and all we're achieving by destroying everything is sounds so depressing, but bringing forward the date of our imminent doom. Like, the Earth will be fine. The Earth is going to keep doing what it's doing. It recovers. It'll be okay, but we won't be here for that. Like, it's just, we'll have to deal with the consequences of our actions.
There's a very good book of it's a non-fiction book that to me is short stories of non-fiction short stories of kind of earth horror, let's say.
I love that.
She's called Cal Flynn. She's from Scotland, and she, I can't tell you the name, but I tell you later, you can Google it anyway. She went to several of the most toxic places, intoxicated by several things in the world. But what she's looking for is not as much a devastation, but as the coming back of nature. And there's all the chapters are amazing. But the one in Chernobyl and Detroit, because Detroit has when people just went because the car industry is gone, and it became like a kind of a wood but it has plains. It's very strange because the city is retreating and nature is coming and it's kind of eating the houses and it's becoming a wood. And in Chernobyl, the animals live there. They don't seem to die before. They kind of adapted somehow. You can't touch them. They're toxic to humans, but they're quite okay. The vegetation is there and it's okay. And so the fact that humans can't go there because it has a radiation that is it will kill us, strangely left that part of the forest that is massive to have amazing life, because it doesn't really affect the flora or the earth or the animals for that matter. So
it's incredible.
So it's not a wasteland. It's a gorgeous forest and it can be touched. It's a paradox that since people can't go inside because they will die, that can be touched and can end up being a bit of a sanctuary.
I kind of love that. Yes. It brings me, strangely, it just brings me so much peace. Like if I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed by the news or like climate catastrophe, I'm like, well, sure, we won't be here necessarily, but Earth will be okay. Yeah. Life will go on. I like that idea. I like knowing that we can see that creatures will continue to thrive. There'll continue to be life that will be better off for not having contact with human beings because we destroy everything we touch.
Yeah, we do.
On that bright note, what a happy way to end. I could honestly just keep chatting and chatting and chatting. Thank you so much for your generosity and your time.
No,
it's been
thank you.
So enlightening. It's just amazing to hear from you.
Thank you very much.